Okay, welcome everybody. I think, is that everybody in, Morgan?
So far, yeah, I'm hoping we'll have some couple more join us in the next minute or so.
Yep. So yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome to the third of four safeguarding sessions put on by the Dóchas Safeguarding Working Group. I'm not sure where we have people from around the world. Looks mainly like an Irish audience at this point, but we'll do a little poll to see where everybody's coming from at the moment. But I guess the Dóchas, for those that don't know, that Dóchas is the Irish kind of umbrella organization for international NGOs, and they operate a whole range of working groups for the sector, one of which is focused on safeguarding. And as a member of that group, we meet every couple of weeks and we share good practice and support each other. And we really felt that the sector in relation to safeguarding had probably got to a point of compliance over the last few years, but now is the time to actually move beyond compliance into implementation, into creating a culture of safeguarding across our organizations, through our partners in the countries where we work, and into our programs on the ground. So this third session is called, "What does safeguarding training mean to you and your organization?" I think probably there's been a lot of safeguarding training going on in the sector in the last few years, but how much has it been effective? How much of it leads to improved quality and good practice? That's some of the questions to explore. So just before we really get going, just a little bit of housekeeping. So generally, please stay on mute if you're not speaking. And if you are speaking, remember to turn mute off. This call is being recorded. The recording will be available later, but just to make you all more aware of that. We have a couple of speakers today who are going to lead the sessions. We have Chris O'Connell from Colov and Aileen McNulty from World Vision. I'll introduce them both separately in a minute. And please feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. Morgan will kind of manage that and we can bring them up. And there is also room for Q&As at the end of each presentation as well, where we can look at what's in the chat and people can raise their hand and ask a question as well. So I guess what we've done with these as well, just to get a sense of who's here, is a little poll at the beginning of where we're all from. So Morgan, you can bring the poll up and please just respond to that. You should see something on your screen now. And there's a couple of questions there. Please respond and we'll see who's in the room. Okay, those are coming in. Is that everybody done? What do the results look like? There we go. Lots of international NGO people from head office and a few from local NGOs in countries where those organizations are working, I guess. So a little bit of a balance there. I guess a little bit head office heavy, but it's good to, welcome to the local partners who are here as well. Hopefully it'll be a good discussion going forward in the next hour and a half or so. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris O'Connell. Chris is the Volunteer Quality and Capacity Building Project Officer at Colov, with responsibility for safeguarding within that organization. A fuller bio will be put into the chat if you want it. And I'll hand over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. Yeah, I mean, just to expand a little bit on that, to kind of lay my cards on the table when it comes to safeguarding. So in our role at COLOB, we work with a network of over 30 volunteer sending agencies across the island of Ireland. And so my role is, as sort of implied by the title, is kind of building capacity and improving the quality, and particularly through the COLOB Code of Good Practice in International Volunteering, which promotes values-based international volunteering. And among the values is the one of integrity, and another value of respect. And so safeguarding sort of falls under those. So unlike Aileen, who's going to talk a bit more, about sort of tips and standards when it comes to training, I'm not someone that delivers training directly myself. Rather, I've been in the sort of 7-8 months since I've been at COLOB, very much on the journey of learning about safeguarding, and being the recipient of great training, particularly by a consultant that we use, Angie Bambose, based in the UK, who we've been very lucky to work with, and I've done some online as well. So I'm more, I guess, facilitating rather than delivering. So I'm on this journey, learning a lot. I also convene our COLOB Safeguarding Working Group. So we have 5 different organizations from our network that participate on that, and then I'm also in the Dóchas Safeguarding Working Group as well. So that's just to get a sense of where I'm coming from, not trying to set myself up as an expert in this, but as someone who is learning more as I go, and hopefully then together we can have a bit of a dialogue that will be useful. And I guess one of the things really that I'm hoping to do is with the network that I work is kind of trying to make this idea of safeguarding a real living issue, not something that is just filed in a policy and put away, maybe brought out once a year or something like that. This is something that I think is really important for organizations to have at the front and center of pretty much everything they do, not just programming, but right across the board. So in that sense, I suppose one of the things that I wanted to start off by doing was just to get us into the idea of looking at this issue a bit more, is just maybe a quick poll just based on a bit of data that I was able to locate, slightly Ireland heavy. But yeah, if we could maybe, Morgan, if we could launch just a true or false, very quick rapid fire questions, if you wouldn't mind completing those. On safeguarding, as I say, based on some data from Safeguarding Ireland, Save the Children International, and an organisation called Stop the Abuse, just to get a sense of what we know or think about this issue. I'll just give another minute or so to that. Great, and maybe we could close that poll, Morgan. Oh, there we have it. Okay, so we'll just have a look through these questions. You can see we have a bit of variety anyway, which is good. Okay, so 1 in 4 adults in Ireland claim experience of vulnerable adult abuse to either themselves or someone close to them. So we have 100% saying that's true. It's in fact false. It's, according to Safeguarding Ireland, is 1 in 2 adults. For the next question, we have physical abuse of vulnerable adults has been witnessed or suspected by 1 in 3 adults in Ireland. That's in fact true. Emotional abuse is the most common type, with over 1 in 3 adults in Ireland having experienced that. That's also true. We said just over 5,000 cases of alleged abuse are reported to the HSE. For those not from Ireland, that's the Health Service Executive in Ireland, their Safeguarding and Protections team each year. and that is false, as the majority say. It's actually over 10,000 in that case. Number 5, concerns about safeguarding of adults in the INGOC at the children more than doubled between 2019 and 2020, and that's true. Everyone got that one correct. And finally, according to a survey of international humanitarian aid workers, 65% knew another aid worker a survivor of sexual violence. That's in fact false. The figure was 86%. So just to close that, I just throw it open for a second just to see if anyone has any immediate reactions or responses to that, or anything that struck them or really surprised them when it comes to, as I say, what is just really a kind of a snapshot of safeguarding in the broadly speaking in Ireland and also the humanitarian sector. Now you can pop it in the chat if you're not happy to speak, or if your connection is a bit iffy. Anyone feel comfortable just to say anything? All fairly alarming. Thanks, Katrina. Yeah. Anyone else feel comfortable speaking up? Okay, if you don't, but please feel free to drop something in the chat. Just any sort of reaction there to that. But we can sit with that for a little bit longer anyway. That's fine if people don't feel comfortable giving an immediate response. But it goes to show, I suppose, at the very least, and again, I would say, and probably those who conducted those research would say that, this is not necessarily comprehensive, or a completely accurate picture of what is an extremely challenging issue to work with and to research, but it does give a bit of a snapshot of how important and how prevalent these issues are, and therefore I suppose points to the importance for all of our organizations in engaging fully with safeguarding training as a sort of ongoing learning process, rather than it being again sort of a self-standing thing. So thanks a lot for engaging with that. For the next bit, we were going to open up a Jamboard and have people just with a few prompt questions, just to spend a little bit of time giving some responses to the question, what does safeguarding mean to you? So you can take that in terms of your, I guess, particularly your professional roles, but there may also be elements of your personal life into which this comes. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Jamboard. There's a link that Morgan has put into the chat there. If you click on that, it should open up a browser page, and from there, maybe Morgan can just demonstrate quickly how it works. Do you want to unmute yourself, maybe, Morgan, and talk through what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So if you can all see my screen here now, like you go to the left underneath this select arrow, you click sticky note and change the colors if you like, or just stick with yellow. Type whatever your thoughts are into the sticky note and click save. And then your sticky note will pop up on the screen, and you can move it anywhere around if you would like, and re-edit by double clicking on the sticky.
Thanks, Morgan. So just a few prompt questions. What does safeguarding mean to you or your organization? Just some associations, what words or ideas come to mind? What groups do you think of when you hear this concept? The kinds of risks maybe, and the relevance to you in terms of your organization or your particular role. So we'll just give a few minutes to that. I don't know, Morgan, if you want to play a little bit of music, maybe while people just spend a couple of minutes doing that. Sorry, I'm dropping that on you suddenly, but just thought it might be nice.
It's a lovely idea.
And if anyone has any problem accessing the Jamboard, maybe just put something in the chat. Thanks, Morgan. great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Morgan, for the bit of music as well. We might keep that handy for our next Jamboard. Would you mind maybe sharing the Jamboard again, Morgan? Thanks very much. Well, thanks everyone for all of that response. There's a huge amount there, as we can see. I'm not sure if you've taken the time to read some of the responses from others, but there's I mean, I guess one thing that's coming across clearly is the importance of safeguarding. There's a couple of references there to reputational risks, which is certainly something that's very much to the fore in terms of thinking about safeguarding in the sector these days. And then I suppose there's a few references which are interesting as well. There's references to children, the references to the most vulnerable, but a few references also to protecting us all, or all of us, which is really important to consider as well, because I think safeguarding is something that, as we think of it now in terms of the sector, is something that is broader than the sort of previous more targeted focus on children or vulnerable adults or adults at risk. So I think it's interesting to see the shift is being acknowledged here, and that it also is mentions of that there's a lot to learn here. So I don't know if anyone feels comfortable saying anything about what they posted. I also see some references to sort of who is who need a reference to the board there in terms of who drives this standard. I think that's really important as well. And the balance between and some references to capacity too, which are really important in terms of different organizations of different sizes with different capacities, and yet being held to the same standards. And that's a challenge. And again, then that's where, you know, I think training and prevention and thinking about this so that your limited resources are used, you know, in the most effective way possible, I think is really important, particularly for all organizations, but for smaller organizations with little wiggle room, that's really important. So I'm not sure if anyone has any comments they want to add in the chat box, or anyone wants to unmute and say anything about anything that they posted or someone else posted. Was anyone thinking of any particular cases when they were or scandals, I suppose, that they came to mind when they were posting any of these questions, or know of any organizations that have suffered? I see a few references to loss of funding, loss of reputation, that sort of thing.
I would come in here, Chris, just to get things going. I mean, it looks, one of the things that comes across as a theme there is just the risk to an organization of not doing this. How, I mean, I'd put the comment there about one single safeguarding lapse can destroy an organization, and I think that was proven a few years ago. There's kind of a big kind of reaction to that, of like, oh my God, we can't have that happen to us, and we've all panicked and put policies and practice procedures in place, but are they really effective now? I mean, I would say within Children in Crossfire, we still really struggle to get disclosures through our program. And we know we work in schools, we know we work in communities where violence against women and children is prevalent, but it can be quite hard to create a trust, I suppose, in those communities where people are willing to disclose. And then there's the question for a small organization like us of how do we where is it our responsibility to take action and you know, take a case on, versus where might we signpost somebody to another resource or put information out there. So it's I think it's hard. Often another thing I picked up was around just there's a resource that goes along with improving safeguarding, and that can be difficult for smaller organizations, especially when donors are not ring fencing money for safeguarding, and they'll say, well, you just take it out of core costs or whatever. It's hard to balance. To employ somebody as a safeguarding manager is a big cost to a small organization. So it gets split around, and then you can have gaps around that. I can see some of that coming across. Yeah,
absolutely.
it's interesting. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah, and I think a lot of important stuff signposted there. Anyone else feel comfortable jumping in at this stage?
Sorry, I can't see the sign to put up my hand. So
okay.
No, the issue for me is just about implementation. That's over the years I've seen. Well, I worked in the missionary sector in the past, and where there were implementation of policies wasn't the same as actually having a policy. So it's about ensuring that on the ground there's proper monitoring and proper implementation processes, because policy is just a policy. So there are plenty of opportunities for people to talk about it without actually being genuinely committed to implementing it.
Yeah. And just to bring this back, I suppose, to training then, there's a cognitive piece and behavioral pieces that come from that at the very root of it, right? Understanding the issues in order to be able to see them, and in order to be able to implement those policies, and for those policies to become living active things rather than things that sit on a shelf. So I guess that's where the focus of this session is. I think that was Mike, was it? Thanks very much for that. So what we're going to do now, just for a few minutes, is sort of, I guess, bring this down maybe to the sort of a grounded level a bit with some scenarios. So I'm just going to try to share a presentation for a few minutes, and what we're going to do is I'll show you the scenarios that I'd like you to discuss, and then we're going to put them in the chat so that everyone can access them, and then we're going to open up some small breakout rooms for you to go into and spend a bit of time just talking through these. There are some prompt questions as well. So yeah, let me just start by sharing this presentation. It's not my presentation, that's Alien's presentation. So let's see. Yes, here it is. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that.
Yeah.
And so there are just some scenarios here, 5 scenarios. They're drawn on, sort of drawing on real world examples to a greater or lesser extent. And yeah, the idea is really, I suppose, just to give you these grounded sort of things to talk through and get a sense then of very much that point that Mike was making, in terms of the implementation. Where do things stand in your organization? What would your response be to these? And obviously these are I suppose. To give a bit of a warning, perhaps a little late, apologies, but I mean, these are obviously, and anything around safeguarding we're dealing with, these are potentially, distressing sorts of scenarios that we're looking at. But unfortunately, I guess that is the reality of anything relating to safeguarding. But I guess the point of this is to emphasize the importance of training in terms of being prepared and preventing these sorts of issues from arising as much as possible. So if we're okay with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll put the scenarios as outlined there into the chat for you to then discuss in the breakout rooms, unless anyone has a question or a comment that they'd like to make at this stage. So,
I would just, Chris, just before we go into those groups, just to get some clarity for everybody, is every group looking at all of the questions?
Yes.
A little bit of time on each one. Okay, that's good. And then just something that once you end up in your room, to pick somebody who might just give a very short kind of summary of the discussion back to the plenary afterwards.
Yes, sorry, yeah, Matt, that's a very good point. I'm just having some trouble copying and pasting that into the chat, Morgan. I'm not sure if you were able to do it. Not sure if there's something up with my computer here. It doesn't seem to like the idea, even though it's something I've done successfully in the past. But yeah, thanks very much, Matt, for mentioning that. Yeah, the idea of just someone perhaps from the group could be a spokesperson at the end and just report back. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, so we're just popping those in one by one. I'm not sure what their issue is there. For me,
automatically be placing people in breakout rooms. So as soon as I open them, you should get pulled into them. But as Chris
and we'll give I think about 10 minutes for this, and see how we're getting on at that stage. Yeah, thanks very much for everyone for participating in this, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes. I think that is everyone back, hopefully. Thanks very much for that. And I guess I always feel with those breakout rooms and it feels like there's quite enough time. But yeah, on the other hand, I think that's maybe a good sign if there's a bit of conversation and engagement going on. So yeah, as Matt mentioned before we went into the breakout rooms, yeah, hopefully you had a chance to maybe select someone that might give a bit of feedback. So just conscious of the time, we're running a little behind. So if maybe I think we had 3 groups, if maybe we could have one person from each group, maybe just give a real sort of headline thing of what struck you most, or in the light of what we had talked about and written in the Jamboard, was there something really that shifted in you in terms of a different thinking, or something that was really emphasized from what you had written before?
Okay, I can speak. Maybe we're in one of, or I was.
Would you mind just giving your name? And that would be great.
Sorry.
Oh, Anthony.
My name
Hi,
is Anthony Hannon, and I work with the Loretto Sisters as the Missionary Development Coordinator. So yeah, we just kind of looked at maybe the first 2 questions. So in the first one, yeah, I mean that people would do the background checks and police checks for any volunteer or any person working with the organization, and then it was noted that organizations, when that nobody or organizations may not write down on paper if they have a concern regarding an individual's working with children or with vulnerable adults, and that would need to be explicitly asked, and it would need to be verbal. So do you have any concerns about working with children or vulnerable adults? And one person in the group noted that they have included that now in their policy. And then with the second one, I mean, yeah, like once somebody hears of something, that they pass it on to the safeguarding officers, and then that the safeguarding officers would maybe deal with it and pass it on to the relevant authorities, depending on the case and the context perhaps and stuff like that, would basically follow the procedures that are relevant within the context that you are working. And then we had kind of a brief discussion at the very end around gender, and would gender make any difference? And we were thinking that maybe, again, perhaps depending on the context, that it might be appropriate for a female person to work with maybe a girl child, or perhaps a male person to work with a boy or something like that. But so that was what we, that was just, yeah.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm hearing a lot about the context and the importance of sort of thinking about the context and analyzing, and therefore where the training comes in is then that it's context, that it reflects the context, and that there's an analytical piece, it sounds like to me, coming across from that, in terms of what are the relations, who are our stakeholders, who are we working with, and understanding that context. And all of that comes with the idea of we're thinking about this from the start, and on an ongoing basis. Thanks very much, Anthony. Is anyone else like to say something?
I can update from our group, that's right.
Okay, thanks. What's your name, please? Sorry, it's a bit tricky to see.
Hansen, and I work with United Purpose and Self-Help Africa.
Thank you.
So we only managed to get through the first three. So in terms of the first one, the measures that are in place, so it's making sure that there's clear messaging from, before even an interview is scheduled. So making sure that the job description and any adverts have clear messagings on a zero tolerance policy. And then, when we do invite candidates to interview, it's making sure that safeguarding policies are sent at that time so that they know what our policy is, making sure that interview questions include something on safeguarding so we can assess motivations for applying for roles. And then, once we're proceeding further, making sure that reference requests are done and that they are verified, and then also depending on the level of the role, making sure that things like police clearance certificates, DBS checks are done. For the second one, obviously making sure that training has been delivered to everyone within the organization, so everyone knows what their responsibility is, making sure that people are aware that if they see something concerning, that they raise it immediately, not in a day or 2 days time. Making sure that there is a clear policy in place outlining what would happen in the event of a concern or an incident being raised. And what else was said here? Yeah, and then someone else also mentioned just having a code of conduct in place that people have signed. So just making sure that there's engagement with the policies. Then the third one we discussed, so obviously with this, basically it's just getting on top of something like this, so making sure that the organization can defend itself, that a plan of action can be put in place to try and mitigate any of or any further consequences for this media report, making sure that obviously an investigation is launched, that the organization takes any allegation, whether they think it's founded or not, seriously, they're looking into it basically, and then making sure that plan of action is done to address it, to build up the reputation again of the organization, making sure that that lessons learned have been done, that it's been assessed, and that something like this doesn't happen again in the future.
Yeah. And even in just those three, I think, coming across all the different parts of an organization that are involved, right, in responding to these scenarios, which again is sort of something else that I think comes across for me in looking at safeguarding, is that this isn't something that is siloed. Obviously, there would need to be particular people with particular roles, but the importance of this as being mainstreamed across an organization. And again, that's where we come back to the importance of training. Thanks very much for that. And just at the last group, then maybe just quickly if there's anything to add, because I know we're running a bit behind, but I appreciate the feedback.
Hi, I was in the last group. We didn't get a huge amount of time, so we just had the first question really. I think a lot has been said already in terms of the process and procedures, but I think one thing that we lightly touched on was also the use of an informal network. So you have your formalities around reference checks and policies and safeguarding, signposting, but because it is such a sensitive issues and issues around GDPR and accusations and data protection, that informal network is also quite important, to check in with similar organizations, through your own networks, to see if there has been any issues. I've seen it work before, not just with safeguarding, but with fraud and corruption issues as well, just to have that sort of informal check with similar organizations that a person may have worked with.
Okay,
that was really everything from our side. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Evelyn, and thanks very much to everyone for that feedback. I know we had, Morgan, just it was mentioned their policies and codes of conduct. We had a short poll just to get a sense. So maybe just while I'm passing back to Matt to introduce Aileen, if we could launch that poll. I think we were, just very quickly again, just to give us a little bit of a sense of the familiarity or not, or where your organizations are at. when it comes to this. So it would just literally, as I'm passing back to Matt, just a very quick yes, no to that, I'd say, and then we'll pass those results maybe to Aileen. But I'm going to pass back to Matt now. I'll chat to you again in a little bit. But thanks very much everyone for your engagement in those scenarios and the Jamboard. So yeah, thanks again. I'd say we could close that poll now, Morgan. Thanks very much. I think, yeah.
Unmute. Should listen to my own instructions. Thank you for that. Thanks for that, Chris, and good discussions, good feedback from everybody. I've noticed there's a question in the chat there from Aganzi. Is that, excuse my pronunciation? We will save that till the end. I think it's a good question to stick into, but Aileen is here with us from World Vision. She is the HR and Operations Manager with responsibility for safeguarding in World Vision Ireland. So Aileen, over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Matt. Morgan is very kindly going to share my slides because it wasn't working earlier for me. The joys of Zoom. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the difference between online training, how people find it, and in-person training and what your organization does. And then just kind of a little overview at the end with Chris and myself. So Morgan, if you got the second one. And next, yeah. So as I said, we'll cover suggestions, ideas on how to successfully deliver online training. Now we're in a new working environment, given that a lot of people, organizations are still hybrid, and you know, I suppose people are spread out all around the place. Now we'll also cover how in-person training is still relevant to an organization, while online does have its benefits. In-person one still really does well. But then we'll also ask the question, how often should we do training? How often do you do it in your organization? So if you go to the next one, Morgan, and the one again. So we have a little poll here asking, how often do you deliver online safeguarding training in your organization? So Morgan, if you could launch that, please.
So I'm just going to pop a link in the chat for everybody, and then I'm going to pull up on my screen how you can also join this Mentimeter poll.
Thanks, Morgan.
Bear with me. There we go. So there's a link in the chat there that you can access. And then I'm going to present my screen. And let me know if you can see this okay. So can you see? So www.menti.com. And if you enter the code 75186188, or you can use the QR code there. And how often do you deliver online safeguarding training? So you can enter your response there. And just as I see that question in the chat, Irene, yes, the session slides will be shared and the recordings, but we're still going through the sessions at the moment. So we'll be following up when the sessions are complete. Thanks very much, Irene.
So it looks that everyone looks similar. A lot of annually to and including at the time of induction, very good. Yet to start, maybe are you doing in-person training only still? Plan for twice a year, once a quarter, depending. Very good. Okay, so it's really interesting, everyone's answers. It's nice to see what everyone's doing. It kind of gives everyone ideas as well about what we're doing in person at home. Okay. And it is hard, really, really hard to organize training. So carry on. Morgan, can we move to the next one? So just some simple tips for everyone about online or in-person training. It's good to be there a bit early to kind of greet, to chat to those who show up for a few minutes before the start time. Sorry, thanks, Morgan. It's nice because it breaks the ice, because you know when you're organizing training, they come in, they're like, oh, this is just a formality, a tick the box thing sometimes to some people. to yourself who's planned the training, written out everything to do with it. You know, you've put a lot of blood, sweat and tears into it, so it's really, really important to you. It's always good to play upbeat music at the very start to generate a good atmosphere, because it's relaxed. It shows that, you know, you're not just going to be dictating at them, that it's going to kind of have a round discussion. I find using icebreakers to kick things off and engage learners as much as you can, it really helps. And even though safeguarding is such a heavy topic, there is ways of doing little things like that in it. And I found personally where I am in World Vision, it's worked because it just breaks the ice a little bit with them. And I've also found that, you know, when you're going through the agenda at the start of it about what you want to cover in safeguarding, to kind of let them know there is a little break planned in. So mentally they know then, right, I can get to there and then I can get to the end. And it kind of just breaks it up so that it's not continuous talking all the time. Morgan, next one, please. So benefits of online training. I was hard to come around to this one at the start because I was so used to doing in-person training all the time. It took a bit of adapting for myself, and I can't deny that. But I did find face-to-face courses can be so inconvenient to organise because it's hard to pick a time that suits everyone to show up. In person, you've got to, you know, plan a room, and you've got to find a space that's big enough for everyone, especially if you've got a large team. But then additionally, face-to-face courses are usually more expensive because obviously you're renting your room and all the supplies, and if you're printing things and things like that. And overall, it can be far more convenient and beneficial to your company to invest or deliver high quality online training. Being that in, you know, everyone, if it's online training, they can do it in their own time. It might be a course you've created online. And then if it's one you're delivering, then obviously you can record it as well and go back. But you can have far more attendees at it than you would at an in-person one if you're limited on space. Then next one, Morgan, please. I've found to not treat sessions like they're meetings, you know, where you're just, you're reading your PowerPoint, you're making no eye contact with the person, that you're just sitting at a table and you're talking. I found that getting up and, you know, kind of just how you're talking to the person online, they can still see some of your body language, though it's limited than what it would be in person. Even if you use the same program, make sure your course feels and looks like the genuine learning intervention that instead of a meeting. And then sometimes it's important to look at what facilitators used to do in the old days. And again, that comes back to your body language, how you're talking. And sometimes people read your face. You know, if you're doing a online training session, you know, talking with your hands, it comes back far more impactful than it just does when you're sitting staring at the screen, just talking at it. I find it to be helpful. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that. If you have any ideas, you can put it into the chat there. Be good to see what you all find with that. I also think being more on the screen, you can ask participants to turn on the cameras throughout the session, but unfortunately you can't force them to do so. Yet you should lead by example and be on the screen as much as possible instead of talking from behind a presentation. So having, like as Chris did, having less PowerPoints sometimes can be, but given safeguarding is so important and you can't stress how important it is. But seeing your face is not the same as being in the same room, but still a lot closer than it is to a voice and a screen, because people can see your emotions, how you're reading things, you know, and I suppose visuals in face can be very impactful on people. I'm not advocating the banishment of slide presentations, but overusing them can be a bit boring. And I think we've all been in training sessions where we've been, you know, killed by PowerPoint. And the chance of having good engagement dwindles significantly if they can't see you. You know, again, what do you do in your own one? Instead, it's better to be present, share stories, engage in casual on-topic conversation than to just soldier through impersonal content. So I did training with new team members the other day on safeguarding, and it was on safeguarding communication because they work in the fundraising department. And we were doing it in person because we were all in the office, and it was really good because we had a good discussion about some of the things, and they were able to ask, really relevant questions. So I just found that to be good, but you can also incorporate that to on-screen training as we've done. So if we move on to the next one then, Morgan, please. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. I'm a Carlow girl and my family tell me I talk too fast all the time. So do slow me down if you need to, okay? I also found make learning interactive. This advice is relevant for any type of learning. So whether it's safeguarding or off safeguarding, learners who are not involved, they can lose interest. They totally tune out and you can see it in their face. They're just like, oh God. Information retention rates then can suffer and you end up with a serious waste of time for all concerned, you know, because you've invested in developing this course, delivering the course, they've given their time up to do it. And it's important to be mindful of how well participants know the subject. You know, how you describe it, some might have never ever heard of safeguarding or been involved, especially if they're new to an NGO. So it's kind of making it relevant to what you're doing, but also remember people don't learn the same way. There's many ways you can use it, you know, Zoom or Teams to ensure the course is interactive, exactly like Chris did earlier with the polls and the Jamboards and bringing you out into rooms and stuff like that. And you can still do that as part of safeguarding because it's a really good way of brainstorming, you know, how you can make it better within your organization and how to be more impactful that people actually remember it. Because especially if we're only doing it once a year, you know, how can you make sure that it's going to be in their mind continuously all the time with everything they do within their job in charity. It does take a long time to explain why safeguarding is such an importance to the organization, but once people get it, and as we were talking when you went out to your rooms and Chris mentioned afterwards, it's really important that people know from the top down, the board, the CEO, the senior management team, everyone all the way down to the very bottom, that everyone knows that everyone is singing off the same page, that it's really important to them. And you don't want to lose the power of the engagement power of interactivity. So Morgan, please, next one, thanks. Keep content to a minimum, since we all know Zoom fatigue is a major issue. It's keeping things short and sweet is highly advisable where you can, because we have our policies. So training doesn't need to have every single word of the policy in it, but you're relating it back to the policy and keeping the training relevant. And sometimes actually showing videos or having a statement from a person impacted or you know, an investigation of whatever may have come up. Remember that self-learning, directed learning is very popular these days as well to people. And the goal is to avoid overload and not to shave minutes off the module, but to make sure that your point is heard. It's always important that we focus on what's essential. And if you can trim learning material to avoid tedious or over repeating, then you can do that, but also not to lose the main point of the topic that you're doing. And to always offer the right resources and allow learners to learn, but make sure that they understand what they're learning and how important it is. And you can always upskill them so they can help other learners learn about safeguarding as well. Morgan? I've found that piece of advice is games are engaging and fun, and I learned that off an old trainer from me, that, you know, as I said earlier, interactive, make games, have fun, that, you know, as you can do scenarios, create a scenario, safeguarding scenario, and see how they can adapt to an incident that comes in, and you're putting people into groups and kind of giving them role plays and things like that. They can really, really work. For example, if you're facilitating a module on leadership, safeguarding leadership, you could have 3 truths and a lie type quiz about, you know, safeguarding, just like what Chris did on his ones where, you know, is it true or false? And you can kind of come up with interesting ways of doing it. And it's a learning process because we're all trying to adapt to online learning even more so than in person. Morgan, if we move to the next one, please. Thanks. Closing online thoughts, find ways to keep remote learning engaging. It's a big challenge for learning professionals, but even if you're not a qualified learning professional and you're responsible for safeguarding, because I know one of the things that came up in the chat earlier was that some organizations don't have money for a specific person just for safeguarding that can deliver training and everything on it. So it's given to someone else to do. And it can be really hard if it's not your area of expertise. And so you have to upskill yourself to do it. Video became our go-to method for everything, but it's not a good enough reason then for us to drop the ball and not deliver any training and it to be ad hoc. Like, you can do little varied things. These are just some tips to help make online sessions more enjoyable. But as I said, we should always be on the lookout to make broader innovative approaches or different things to how online training works, whether it's delivered by an actual online platform or it's by you doing a Zoom or a Teams call with the person. Morgan, if we can move to the next one, thanks. So downside to online training, less interaction. It's very hard, you're not in room, so a person can't just start talking and asking you a question in person. Did the training hit home? And when it's in person, you can see the full body language. There's no distractions. Attendees can be distracted by emails and team messages. And we all know that happens because it happens in meetings all the time as well, because you're getting emails from them while you're delivering the training. You're like, you're meant to be paying attention. Unable to read body language, as I said, and it can be really, really hard. And then I have a question for you. What do you find to be the downside of delivering online training? If you can follow Morgan's instructions again on the chat, it'd be really, really good, because I know I find it very hard, and it can still be hard, depends on the person you're doing it with and if they see it as to be of importance to them as it is to you. Thanks, Morgan.
Can everyone see that okay?
What do you think to be the downside of delivering online training? Yeah. Yeah. I'm agreeing with the two popped up there already. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you a story. I was doing online training with colleagues recently in my old role, and one person had turned off their camera and they were actually doing the laundry while they were listening to the call. So they weren't actually paying attention to the training at all. They were getting all the laundry done. I was like, okay, right, that won't work. So, you do have to put some things in there, and that's the bit with online training. You really don't know. Games are really annoying. Okay, interesting. Wonder what types of game you find very annoying, or what have they made you do to do that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Okay, we're all thinking the same. We're all having the same or similar struggles on it. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Morgan. If we carry on then. Yeah. Perfect. If we go to the next 2 slides down. Perfect. We're just going to talk about in-person training. It is one of my favorite ones. I do personally prefer it online. I do get why online is very important, given that we're spread out everywhere. But I do happen to love the in-person training. Maybe it's the old school of me. But just in the chats, who prefers to deliver in-person training over online training? Like, what do you personally prefer, given that you're the ones having to deliver this training? Can you see in the chat, Morgan? In person, Matthew, yeah. And why, it's mad, we're all saying in person. Why is it we all love in person so much? Is it because it's something we're so comfortable with? Or is it we can have more interaction with the people, and you can actually see it's hitting home and it's registering with them. Plus, it's a great opportunity to build your team, you know, for them to build working proper relationships in person. I find in person is really good. Yes, Emily, I'm more comfortable delivering in person too. I would have liked that. Yeah, person. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate the feedback on this. So, Morgana, if we move to the next one. Perfect. So as we already are all thinking, in-person training provides more hands-on experience. Working with trainers and other learners in person provides opportunities for greater, much more improved interaction. We all agree to that. Talking to another person face-to-face usually provides clarity and understanding that communication you can't get through texting or email. Even live chats and other types of online interaction doesn't give you the same human contact. I found personally, and I'm sure by your comments, you're all thinking along the same. Although learning technologies have advanced so much in recent years, especially since COVID, there's still many fields in which at least some in-person training is usually necessary. And then others find it more beneficial. They, you know, learn better in person than they do online. And we can all see that from team members. Morgan, next one, please. I found, and you know, talking to other practitioners, in-person training allows several employees to learn at the same pace, whereas some people thrive on online learning because they don't like social interaction too much, or they might be more introverted. Classroom or in-person instruction keeps each team member or employee, whichever way you want to call it, learning on the same timeline, so that one person is not flying ahead and then you're holding them back while the rest are all. It's more than one person in the same organization wants to take and complete a course at the same time. In-person training is probably a better fit for this situation when you want to go up levels. In-person training greatly provides greater structure and organization, and from a HR point of view, it's easier to keep track when people do it in person rather than they're doing an online bit and you're having to go in online. Did they do it yet? Did they? And you can find when people are doing online training, they might do half the course, pause it and come back to it a few days later, and you're like, you've probably forgotten part of the first part, so it's less impactful then as well, you're losing it there. It really is hard to monitor that and kind of record that the training is completed and done. Morgan, next one, please. So I suppose, given what you're all saying, you're all thinking the same thing. Students or your employees or whatever you want to call them, once they're in a classroom setting, they can connect in real time, and it does really help. In-person training provides greater opportunities for group activities, interactive projects. I know one said they don't like games, but I do find they do work. But again, you're setting the game up to suit the room you're going to have. It's not going to be the same every time. Then face-to-face interaction can provide more networking opportunities, and it's brilliant for teamwork and opening the communication that, you know, I've worked with people that have only ever worked at home and never met anyone in person, and that's really, really hard. How do you build a working relationship if they only have that? It can be very, very hard. So yeah, Morgan, next one, please. Then distractions, and you're going to laugh now in a minute. When I find when they're in-person training, they've lesser distractions compared to attending online training at home. We've all seen it where their eyes drift away from the screen. Sometimes it happens in the room, but it depends. You hear the clicking of a keyboard, or as I said, you get an email from the training session about other work, that you don't hear dogs barking in the background, phones ringing, alarms going off, or them having to pause the training to go answer the front door. Yeah, and we all get that one too, you know, and it is hard because it is distracting. And having it in person, it provides them a dedicated area where they can actually listen and absorb the training without all those distractions, which really helps the whole training session. Because, you know, as a trainer, if you find that they've disconnected or they're doing other work or things like that, it really is distracting to you as the practitioner delivering it. Morgan, if we go to the next one. Obviously, given you're all here, you think training or safeguarding training is really important to you. And as Chris asked the question, is it important to your whole organization as a whole from top all the way down? I think training is important because it represents a good opportunity for your team members to grow their knowledge base, to become more effective in the workplace, so that they know what safeguarding is and how important it is all the way through, but they're aware of all the steps that can be. Despite the cost of training for employees, the return on investment is immense if it's consistent, that it's delivered continuously. It's not ad hoc here now and again, that there's a proper structure in place. So question for you then is, do you ever stop and ask yourself, is the training consistent? Do you have a training calendar set out for the start of each year so that everyone knows when it is, so they can pencil it in, and that there's no, oh, I didn't know about it, which we always get that one too. So, and then I find there's several reasons it's important for employees to initiate training programs for your team. Retention, development, compliance, and the list could go on. What do you think yourselves? So Benjamin Franklin sums it up lovely, and I really like this one. Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I'll remember. Involve me and I will learn. And I found this to be very true, and I really like this quote because it does. If you involve them in the training session, and you, as Chris did, the breakout rooms, things like that, even if it's in person, you break them out, it's really, really good as well, because they're involved in it. They can't sit back and say nothing, because they have to get involved in it and say something, because the groups are smaller. They do is create a learning experience and use different types of content activities to make your session engaging for your attendees. They don't step by PowerPoint. I know I've had a few slides here today, sorry. And treating your session as a one-way conversation where it's only your voice being heard and they don't get the choice to speak up. Personally, I feel training sessions should be interactive, lighter in vein, despite the really heavy topic that safeguarding is, but any topic you're doing, not just safeguarding, and it will achieve end results that you need. Training's not just about how you deliver your session, but how well you manage your session and provide valuable reports to your organization. You know, it's what you're able to see from it. That's it from me. Thank you. I'll hand back to Matt.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aileen. Really good tips and tricks there. It's always been a balance, but I think it's impacted all our lives in the last couple of years, how we now conduct these things. I've been kind of half amazed at what we have been able to do in the limited restrictions, but also feeling a little bit of loss at that in-person side of things. So I'm aware we're a little bit behind schedule, and we're gonna condense the next bit, but I'm gonna hand over to Chris, who's gonna just do the final session before a Q&A and wrap up. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Just while we're going into that, maybe Morgan, if we could share the results of the poll that we did before Aileen's presentation. I guess the idea is just trying to ground this a little bit in our own organization. So we see everyone has a policy, and everyone is familiar with the policy. Most people are familiar with reporting procedures, and there are codes of conduct that have been in the main signed by participants, so that's all very positive. So I guess that is the aspect of making sure that these things come off the shelf and are brought into the working lives of the organizations. In that respect, I just thought we'd have maybe another short session in breakout rooms, just to have a bit of a chat after some intensive listening there. We have a Jamboard, but I'm less, if you don't have the time to post much on the Jamboard, I think that's okay. More to use it as a set of prompts for a conversation in the breakout rooms, just again about sort of grounding it in your organization. So without anyone giving up any anything privileged information from your organizations, but just to sort of compare notes a little bit with the others in the breakout room with regard specifically to how safeguarding training is delivered. And so if you do want to then share a couple of post-its, that would be great. for us to get a sense. But yeah, so just 5 minutes in that, and then we'll come back and you know, we'll do a short Q&A to wrap up then after that. Okay, thanks, Matt. Yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time to do that. I'm not sure if we can see that Jamboard. I don't think anyone had time to do anything on that, but hopefully the idea with that again was just to, I suppose, to ground the this conversation a little bit and give some prompt questions for you to maybe have in your mind, or to bring back into your organizations with your colleagues, and think a little bit more about the training, who's involved, who's leading, who's participating, the frequency that training happens, and also then as Aileen was talking about, you know, the ideas of refreshing that training. So if anyone has, yeah, as Morgan said, if anyone has any questions or any comments, you can raise your hand now, or you can put something into the chat box. I'm just going to share very quickly a graphic. So I mentioned Angie Bambose, that trainer that we've been working with at Kolov. So I'm trying to share the full screen version. There it is. And out of a process that we've been working on internally across our whole network that we work with, which is very varied. So we had to have something that was quite broad in terms of our principle around safeguarding, and so one of the things then that, you know, we were keen to have is to really emphasize this ongoing nature of safeguarding learning and training. And so this is something that she came up with for us, which I think, you know, does a nice job of you know, kind of visualizing this idea that, you know, it's not about just having your policies and your procedures in place or even disseminating them, but is the implementation, as was mentioned earlier. But it's really important, I think, as well, this reflection and learning. You know, we're trying to improve. There's been so many changes in this area of safeguarding, even in the last few years. You know, it's moving, and unfortunately, often in response to scandals and incidents. So you know, it's an area that we can't sit still on. It's quite dynamic. We have to be thinking about it, reflecting our policies and procedures up to date. Something that we in Kolov, we're reviewing our code principle, the principle of our code of good practice relating to safeguarding now, because among our work with Angie was that it was no longer up in meeting international standards. So we're reviewing that code principle right now. So we're reflecting on it. We have our working group working on that. And then, yeah, we're going to be sharing our learning. So for us, we have a peer support meeting of our network next week, and that'll be a moment to do that. But for each organization, it'll be different. It might be much easier than with us, where we work across 30+ organizations. And again, then it's about making the changes, updating those policies and procedures, and on and on. So hopefully that sort of little graphic will you know, help to just communicate that idea that this is very much an ongoing process of learning, reflection, and of course implementation. But you know, making sure that we're taking lessons from what we do. You know, the standard and with this, and obviously when we get into media and those sorts of things, it was one of the scenarios we gave, can be very harsh judgment, but in the main, you know, our defense in terms of safeguarding is that there's a thinking process. We're examining the risks. We're training our staff so that they also see them. We're reflecting on this regularly. We're refreshing, and and when things go wrong, or if things go wrong, and we're doing everything that we can to prevent those, that we also then respond appropriately and strongly. Those sorts of things may be more covered in some of the other sessions that we've been having, but the training then being a really integral part of that whole process, and that's how you know, we do safeguarding is not by meeting impossible standards. It has to be, you know, reasonable, but this idea that you know, we have to be thinking, and training our staff is core to that. So I'll finish talking there, and maybe we'll just open up for, you know, if Aileen wants to say anything else on that, or to open up for any Q&A, because I know people have to probably go soon. So thanks again for your attention.
No, I think I've kind of talked enough. I think they're probably tired of me now. But I do love Anthony's comments, so thanks, Anthony. It made me laugh.
Thank you both. I'll just, well, I know we're over time, but I have a couple of, I just wanted to get back to a couple of questions that have come up in the chat, and maybe just to kind of, not sure we have time for a full discussion, but when you're working in an environment where whistleblowing is seen as a slander by other members of the community, I mean, I've directly, I guess, faced this in some of our work in Ethiopia, working with our partners there. Even the word, the concept, the word whistleblowing was not familiar to them. And I guess the lesson and the learning we took from that is really looking at embedding our safeguarding training with our partners in country, in their culture. Safeguarding Support Hub are actually very good for that. I put a link for them in the chat. They actually have Ethiopian materials, and they have an Ethiopian office. So that was where we went to solve that. But I think probably for us, the issue was really about coming at it from the place of the survivor, coming at it from the place of what you want to see in your communities, in your organizations, and what it might feel to be on the receiving end of bullying or sexual harassment or violence, and kind of plugging at it from that perspective, if you like, and then saying, well, you know, if you see something like that and you'd like to stop it, what kind of mechanisms might you like to have to look at it? And we call that whistleblowing, but there may be other ways and other mechanisms that exist in communities. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that at all.
No, I think you're right there, Matt, on that. It's a tricky one, especially when it's in other countries. And, you know, I know from us in World Vision, we do a lot of training with our partners and everything. Everyone is held to the same standards. We do a lot of toolbox talks. So we do the proper training once a year. So they do the online, and then they do an in-person one relevant to their department and kind of an overview. But then every month we take maybe a tiny part of it to refresh it. And we do it as a toolbox talk. So department managers or site manager or project manager, they can do it, and it's keeping it in the forefront of everyone's mind that it's not, you know, you're not doing anything wrong by whistleblowing. If someone makes an allegation or anything like that, we have to take it very seriously. But again, it's enabling our team members to deal or learn to do things better as well.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it comes back, as so much does these days, to locally led development and localization, and coming from that angle. I think that was all the specific questions. Has anybody got any burning question to ask now? They want to just say something? The floor is open. Everybody's got washing to do or lunch to have, I guess, depending on where you are. So, well, I mean, let me just say thank you. Thanks to Dóchas for facilitating this, Morgan especially for all the background work, to Chris and Aileen for your presentations, really insightful, and for all you guys there for attending, showing up, engaging in the conversation. We'll look out for the recording and the links, and see you at the next one. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Lovely to meet you.
Thanks, everyone.